the obvious point about the impact of Brexit and so on is that the restrictions it puts on our migrant workforce and the obvious deleterious effects of that is that people are now thinking about their futures in Scotland and the UK and thinking, am I not welcome here? Am I going to go somewhere else? So there's some skilled people, there's some semi-skilled people in vital industries and vital sections in the housing sector that we rely on, in construction, in engineering, in heating and plumbing and all those professions which we desperately need and we're short of. We know that recessions usually they start in the construction sector, and actually that one they talk about in 2008 actually started in 2006, 2007, when there was a massive collapse of housing investment and construction business industry. So you spot the trends coming from there, and so you always worry when you see those trends. Anything that negatively impacts on that and migrant workforce's access to that market, that labour market, and to offer us to their skills and all the things that they bring, is a negative for us. And the fact is that we're in a situation where that is likely to happen. If the Tories win that election, we will be leaving the European Union on the 31st of January, and literally thousands of people already left. We've seen that impact on the health service in England particularly. I don't know how much of an impact it's had in Scotland, but undoubtedly it must have done so. There's no doubt from my experience that the communities that I lived with in public housing, in Sighthill and in Red Road, contributed massively to building a renewed sense of community empowerment, achievement, diversity, cultural values. It helped to keep school rolls up. The fact is that some of the schools that in my area wouldn't probably be there now had those communities not come there and made their lives there. They've made massive valued contribution, and I hope that Scotland will be a more welcoming country. That's why I think we need independence and all of that, but I won't bore you with that. But I suppose that migrant communities need to be given the respect due, but then I don't think they are. They've been used as a weaponized attack vehicle for people who advocated the Brexit referendum in the first place. They used English nationalism to whip it up, and as a Londoner, that frustrates me enormously. That the country down there is unrecognisable to me now. That relatives of mine are voting with a sort of not quite fascist, but it's certainly racist kind of viewpoint in their head, that foreigners are a threat to them rather than the capitalists who caused the economic crisis that they're worried about. They don't blame them, the ones who live down the street for them in very big mansions and have got tax breaks. They don't blame them, they blame migrant workers, and that's wrong. But that thankfully we have a much healthier public debate in Scotland. We have better leadership from all the political parties. Nobody plays that card up here, and I'm very glad for that our Parliament leads the way and our Council too leads the way in making our city a welcoming place for migrants and people who visit here. So I think that's the best message we can probably all send, is that we have that, we're probably united on that, and I'm guessing.
I'm going to go to Ben now.
Thank you very much. I think this question needs two words at the end of it, and that's after Brexit. Of course, it's no secret that the Liberal Democrats don't want to leave the European Union. If we are elected as majority government, we will reverse Article 50 on day one. Thus, my answer is going to be aimed very much at us remaining in the European Union. The supply of labour will continue because we will not have Brexit. We'll have a huge Remain bonus in which we're going to use that money to fund and invest in people and in training. It's everyone knows it on this panel, I'm sure, that migration is a net benefit to this country, and those who say it isn't just haven't got the facts in their head. So with asylum seekers, we're going to allow asylum seekers to claim benefits for work. We're also going to allow them to contribute their skills by working, because we think that with them contributing their skills by working, it will open up and increase the dialogue to understand what their story is, and thus will probably lead to more successful applications for them to stay, which will be a net benefit for not only our economy but our diverse workforce and our diverse communities. I'd like to ask why the SNP are evicting asylum seekers in Glasgow when they have nowhere else to go. Released asylum seekers currently who have failed their current assessments are turfed out onto the street. They're in an unusual position where they're unable, because they've had their request for asylum declined, to claim housing benefits. They're unable to stay in their current homes, and they're unable to file for being homeless. So that's a huge issue there. So our policies ultimately are aimed at us remaining in the EU. But if we don't remain in the EU, we will find money to increase net migration, because it is a positive fundamentally.
Thank you, Frank.
The history of Glasgow is built on a combination of the indigenous community and migrant communities. The waves that came over from the East European and Russian pogroms in terms of the Jewish community, to the major waves in the economic crisis in terms of the Irish economy, in terms of the Irish community, which I'm a part and a product of, and also the contribution been made in recent years by a variety of different communities that have come here and settled here. All the evidence tells you that migrants make a positive contribution to the economy. All the evidence tells you that people want to work really hard, they want the very best for their families. And in fact, our schools in Glasgow, I would argue, are improving dramatically, partly because of that dynamic within those migrant families, that education is a way out of self-improvement, which is maybe it hasn't always been the case in recent years within the indigenous community. We need to work with families trapped in the cycle of poverty to raise their ambitions around that. So this city is a living, breathing example of integration. Tough as it was, I mean, it wasn't easy for the original Irish settlers coming to Glasgow. If you look at the history of the city, we weren't as welcome as a nation as sometimes has been presented in recent years during the debate about independence. I'm with William McIlvanney, the late Scottish novelist, though, that we are all mongrels. We are a product of everything that creates the dynamic that we are. And obviously, in terms of England, there are an incredible number of fantastic conurbations in big cities in London, Manchester, Birmingham, where the diversity is actually strengthened and enlivened those communities. The problem has been we've looked insular because of what's happened in Brexit. We've looked for people to blame. We've not argued the case for why migrants can make a positive contribution. And I understand that nervousness and fear, which probably propelled a fair amount of the broader vote. And let's not forget that over 1 million people, more people voted Leave in Scotland than actually voted SNP in the last election. So there's a scale of voter in this country, even in Scotland, where we try and say everything's very different from the rest of the UK. We are, as in a sense, divided on these matters as other parts of the United Kingdom. But the city of Glasgow is a shining example of how you use migration for a positive benefit. And there's no doubt, if you look at the culture, the history, the dynamic, the confidence this city has, is because there's been a contribution where we have worked together as brothers and sisters to make sure that we build that. And within that, the kind of role that housing associations have played. I mean, I look at the housing associations that Thomas and I share in the East End, and the work done by the associations there to really work, particularly with the African and Polish communities that have come in recent years. But the real tragedy is the diminution in EU migration who were making a contribution, and not just in Glasgow. If you look at the wider Scottish economy, particularly in the hospitality sector, that the loss of people who were making a contribution to our economy is quite profound. And it is astonishing to watch some people who own some of the farms, who voted Leave, now being upset. They don't have the staff to actually do the work that's required to make sure their product can get to customers. So there's a massive challenge facing us. We need to do something about it. Labour's commitments are pretty straightforward. We will scrap the 2014 Immigration Act, which was clearly targeting families, particularly those families that have got right to stay here and their wider family members. So again, we need to work on that. But also, whatever happens on Brexit, I hope to goodness we don't have the scenario where Boris Johnson has a majority on Friday morning to push through the nonsense deal that he's presented as a new deal, which is the same deal as Theresa May couldn't get through even her own parliamentary group on, and then for moving forward on reducing the opportunity for us to have freedom of movement. I finish on this. Freedom of movement has been a good thing for Glasgow. It's been a good thing for Scotland, and it's been a positive thing for the United Kingdom. It would be a terrible tragedy if we go for a hard Brexit, as could occur if Boris Johnson, I'm going to call him Donald Trump there, I get confused with the two, you know. So if Boris Johnson gets his majority on Friday morning, that will be a major, major blow to the wider prosperity of Glasgow and Scotland.
Just to start with, the stuff that Ben had said about this really frustrates me when it comes to this debate. There's a big difference between asylum seekers and refugees and migrants, and we need to keep remembering that. So to turn a debate about migrants into asylum seekers, it plays into people like Nigel Farage and stuff like that's hands when we do stuff like that. So I think that's wrong, and I'm sure Graham will defend his administration. But to be fair to them, they did step in when it came to the circle evictions. In fact, all political parties in Glasgow City Council made sure that we were standing up for people who were being evicted. But I'll let Graham come in on that a bit more. In terms of migrants, look, I want a system that's fair for everybody. Because the issue that we have right now with freedom of movement is that it's not fair for everybody. Instead, people who are in the EU can come in and leave, and that's fantastic because migrants offer a lot to this country, and it's fantastic we live in such a multicultural country. And a city that, like Glasgow, I mean, we're sitting in Glasgow Central, the seat which I was speaking about to BBC Asia last week and saying how the best thing about Glasgow Central is just how diverse a community it actually is. Migrants are welcome, and after Brexit, no matter what happens, if we leave or if we don't leave, migrants will be welcome to stay within the United Kingdom. And this idea they won't be has just been ramped up by the other parties, and it's not acceptable to do that. What we do need is we need a system that's fair, and that's why my party's standing on a system of a points-based system, because what we do need to have is a system that means that whether you stay within the EU or you stay without the EU, you're treated the exact same no matter where it is, and that's the kind of system in which we want to see come in. And I think that is the best way to try and attract skilled migrants into this country. The other thing I would say on this whole debate is your question was asking about house builders and caregivers and stuff like that. What we need to do in this country is actually have much more focus on apprenticeships and skills for our young people, so we're training up people in this country as well, because there's been far too much of an emphasis, and particularly where I came from in the East End of Glasgow, on how after school you must get a university degree, you must go to university. And I do think it's Graham's government that's been pushing this idea, and what we actually need is the 170,000 college places that the SNP's cut back into colleges, because that's really, really important. We need more funding into apprenticeships and skills, so then young people can get the skills and jobs going forward. That's the kind of thing that we actually need in this country, not just talk. We actually need to start working on it, and that's what the Scottish Conservative plan is.
Thanks. Yeah. The Greens' view of the Home Office is that it's institutionally racist, and we would like to see it abolished. The fair treatment of people from different areas just doesn't actually happen. I've been canvassing in Glasgow Central, and I've been meeting people from different ethnic backgrounds who are themselves prejudiced against European immigrants because someone from an Asian background, for example, has to try twice as hard to get provisions of social housing and other benefits than somebody from the EU. Now, I was quite alongside the idea of the person who was in need actually getting the benefits that they needed. But I thought that the person who was complaining to me had been shoddily treated by the Home Office. The Councillor Kim Long in Glasgow has been leading a campaign to protect migrants and people who are being evicted by Serco, and we were actually demonstrating outside the Home Office visa office, and our position is that the Home Office should be abolished. In terms of the sort of wider issue of migrants, I'm a migrant. I was born in Canada. It doesn't show. My dad has spent half of his career working in Europe. I've worked in Europe. All of the free movement, I think, is a net good. All of the people coming from different places to Britain to work is also a net good. My cousin had a demolition company, and his favourite workers were from Poland. The problem has been that racist employers in Britain have been taking advantage of people from these backgrounds who will work for less, who will work for below minimum wage because they're coming here desperate and looking to look after their families. And what I think should happen is that there should be more protection for people who are coming here to have decent jobs, minimum wage mandatory for employers, and to make sure that people aren't exploited. Also, I've got a lot of links with university community, and all of the students who are coming here from European countries and all of the researchers who are coming here are depending on the EU for funding. As soon as we lose that funding, then an awful lot of people who are actually here, citizens and residents as well as migrants, are going to find that the universities are going to be cutting their jobs. We have people coming here paying a huge amount of money to actually study, and then finding that their visa is getting cancelled as soon as they've actually graduated, or possibly even before. A friend of mine who was doing a PhD went back to the US and then got a letter saying don't come back until you've got your visa. It took her an entire year to get through the hostile environment that's been set up by the Home Office. So yeah, the Greens in sort of the geopolitical issue, we support Remain. And if we can't remain, then we'll minimise the amount of damage that happens to Scotland. And we will support independence if it comes a case that we have to bring Scotland back into the EU, because we support free movement and the links that the EU gives us. What we'd also do, I've been talking about the Green New Deal, 200,000 new jobs in not only in industry but also in the rural areas in Highlands and Islands. We would make Scotland a desirable place to work.